At the beginning of the film, an Oxford University professor demonstrates a case of female hysteria about Eliza Graves in front of the class. She protested that she was sane, but the professor touched her mercilessly, triggering hysteria in her. They are inappropriate. Every human contact drives her into a state of madness. After the demonstration, he asked his assistant to bring in the next patient. Cut to Christmas Eve. Edward Newgate, a young doctor from Oxford, arrives at Stonehurst Asylum. He was brought into the building by the guard and guard captain Mickey Finn. The institution consists of 200 residents. Most of them were nobles and ladies from the best families in England. PhD Edward came here to gain clinical experience in order to continue his medical practice. He met with the head of the institution, Dr. Silas Lamb. Edward impressed Dr. Lamb with his desire to work with the mentally retarded. So Dr. Lamb invited Edward to attend the afternoon visit. He introduced him to Stonehurst's patients. Some people think they are animals, some think they are delusional, and some think they are gay. But one patient fell into the arms of the doctor. Of particular note to Edward, Lady Eliza Graves. The lady appears at the beginning of the film. She was being treated in a mental hospital for female hysteria. She was from a noble family and married a very wealthy man. Unfortunately, Lady Eliza suffered from hysteria. She reacts negatively to all physical contact. She bit off the ear of her abusive husband. That's why her father took her to a mental hospital. Dr. Edward is fascinated by Eliza's musical abilities. He seemed to fascinate her too. Edward was surprised by the doctor, Lamb's unique way of treating his patients. Instead of trying to solve their problems, he respected their terms and allowed them to happen, allowing them to live happily in their own delusions. PhD. Lamb invited Edward to a staff dinner that night. Many dishes are served politely on the table, but Edward was surprised when he saw the patients sitting on the table with them. According to Dr. Lamb, believes that integrating into high society can be therapeutic for sufferers. During dinner, everyone was chatting happily until Dr. Edward mentioned Mickey Finn is a funny name. This can lead to tension at dinner time. Everyone was silent, but Mickey Finn started laughing hysterically. He then offered PhD Edward a glass of wine. As he was about to drink it, Lady Eliza hit him with her leg from under the table. The doctor threw away the alcohol. Eliza then takes him out and lets him run away on the pretext of cleaning his shirt. Leave the facility as soon as possible. She gave no reason. That night, Edward returned to his room confused. He had his weapons ready in case he needed them in the future. A loud noise startled Edward. He followed him and reached into the cellar. Several people in the prison asked for his help. His first thought was that these were extremely crazy patients. But after talking to them, he realized they were the actual staff and directors of the agency. Lamb was actually a patient who led the rebellion. He locks up the staff and leaves it to the patients, including Finn. Among the prisoners was the de facto head of the institution, Dr. Benjamin Salter, 2 nurses, health guide, and many other things. They were given some drinks and some drugs and taken to the basement. Edward realizes that if Lady Eliza had not saved him, he would have suffered the same fate as them today. Edward was horrified and quickly told Eliza the truth, but she already knew everything. In fact, she is one of the people the doctor considers crazy. Lamb helped lock down the staff. The next day, Lamb took Edward and Mickey Finn on an afternoon tour. They forced Edward to go to the madman's room to change his clothes. The madman's gaze is frightening. When Edward first approaches him, he is attacked by the man. He was about to strangle Edward, but he quickly noticed the name Arthur on the wall. Edward thought this was the name of a madman and called him Arthur. This finally made the man calm down. PhD. Lamb was impressed, but Edward was left badly injured after the encounter. Lady Eliza tended his wounds. Edward told her that he planned to free the prisoners and escape with them. At the time, she revealed Stonehurst Asylum was a cruel place for her patients. They are treated by doctors. Salt was experimented with. His actions and thoughts are of the devil. Lamb, Mickey Finn, Eliza, the cook, and the guard are all the doctor's victims. Salt cruel methods. He pretends to find Eliza, touches her inappropriately, and sends her into hysterics. To cure some of his patients, he applied strong water pressure and placed them in bathtubs. There was running water for several days. According to Salter, patients' greatest fear was being cured of their madness. But he was hard-pressed to find Lamb's worst fear, PhD. As a patient, Salter performed various horrific surgeries on Lamb. Lamb and other patients despised doctors. Take the root with a pinch of salt and plan it for months. Save yourself from torture. Finally, one day, they spiked the doctors and staff's drinks with alcohol and locked them up. Lamb succeeded the doctor. Salter served as director of the institution and allowed patients to live freely. He employed some of them as porters, some as cooks, and some as nurses. He gave meaning to their lives and made Stonehurst a happy place. After hearing the story, Edwards promised she would never suffer like this again. That's what she did. Soon thereafter, Edward made a lasting impression on everyone in the asylum. An old woman refused to eat until her son returned from the war. Edward pretended to be her son and fed the lady lovingly. Seeing this encounter, Eliza becomes even more interested in Edward. She was touched by his kindness. The couple begins to fall in love with each other. Edward tries to convince her to escape the asylum with him, but Eliza has her doubts this idea. Soon after, he was visited by Dr. Edward, called Lamb PhD. Lamb wants Edward to help him conduct experiments on the doctor. Salt support. He tied him to the bed, PhD. Lamb claimed that Dr. Salter is a lunatic who believes he is a legitimate administrator. Coming from Stonehurst, he needed treatment. This type of therapy is called electrotherapy. Then Dr. Lamb pulled the switch in front of Edward, electrocuting him. He asked Edward to do the same. After the electrotherapy, Doctor added salt to his entire memory. The next day was the new year of 1900. Everyone in Stonehurst is celebrating and happy. Edward plans to release the prisoners tonight, hold a ceremony. Everyone danced when Dr. Lamb looked at them. Elsewhere, Edward knew that in the doctor. Lamb has some good stuff in it, so he went looking for it. In Lamb's room when he was a patient, Edward discovered a hidden photo on the wall and carry. Everyone walked out of the building to celebrate the beginning of the new century, but Edward stayed inside, adding a chemical to the champagne that knocked everyone unconscious. However, Mickey Finn caught him red-handed. After a fierce fight, Edward breaks free from Finn's grasp. Top-ups of champagne were brought to the celebration and handed out to everyone, but when they tried to drink it, Mickey Finn stopped them, and Edward's performance was filmed. PhD. Lamb hit him with a bottle. When Edward opened his eyes, he was handcuffed to the bed and taken to the hospital electrotherapy room. PhD. Edward, like the doctor, salt can cause electric shock. Just then, Eliza walked into the room with Edward's pocket watch. There is a picture of Eliza on it. She believes her husband sent Edward to take her out of the asylum. She asks him about his true intentions in coming to the mental hospital. He revealed that 6 months ago he attended a medical lecture in which a doctor appeared Eliza and her physical disability. Her situation made him so pitiful and sad that he vowed to save her from this hell. This was the real reason Edward came to Stonehurst Asylum. As he was being taken away, he begged Eliza to escape the institution. Just like Dr. Lamb wanted to electrocute him and asked Edward about his last will and testament. His request was to hand over the photo in his pocket to Eliza Graves. But in fact, the photo was the one Edward found in Lamb's room. PhD. The Lamb was shocked when he saw it. This image is the reason for his madness. It turns out that Dr. Lamb was a real doctor during the war. He must kill his soldier friends to put them out of their misery. He shot each of them and tried to take his own life, but he escaped bullet. Over time, this drove him crazy. The picture Edward showed him was of a soldier friend of Lamb's. Thus his madness was triggered again. PhD. The Lamb fled from there. Mickey Finn saw this and decided to perform the surgery on Edward himself. But Eliza comes to Edward's aid. The entire establishment watched with delight as they fought. However, Finn hits her trigger point, triggering hysteria and driving her into madness health status. Edward managed to calm her down. Ronaldo put one here, then the fight continues. Mickey Finn ends up being electrocuted and burned to death, but the fire spread and the room began to burn. Eliza runs to rescue the prisoners in the basement, while Edward goes to find Lamb. He found him in the corridor, mad and deceived. So Edward took him out with the other patients. Everyone is safe now. It's all over. Edward wants Eliza to go to a new place with him, but Eliza refuses. Their last kiss. when Edward tells Eliza he has one last secret to share. It's now several months later. Stonehurst is back to normal and better than before. The real head nurse seems to start running things and taking care of the patients after a while, now, including Salt and Lamb. The arrival of the Oxford professor and Eliza Graves' husband at the beginning of the film release her in an institution. But they were surprised when they found the doctor. Edward has freed their 3 children a few weeks ago. The men were surprised to hear this, for the professor himself was a doctor, Edward Newgate, a real PhD Edward. He explains that the person who comes here as a doctor is actually a patient from him. He had met Eliza Graves at a medical demonstration in Oxford. Then he ran away with the doctor, Edward's possessions at a London mental hospital, and his identity stolen, all in an effort to save Eliza Graves. At the end of the film, we see Mrs. Graves and the con man Newgate in Tuscany, Italy. "You are now a PhD, Mrs. Lamb knew her too." The two danced with joy and embraced in the garden of what appeared to be another institution, peacefully managed by nuns. This is the end of the movie Stonehurst Asylum. Now for the explanation. Edward has always been a psychopath. He suffers from a condition called pseudologia fantastica, better known as pathological lying. This is a situation where a person constantly lies for personal gain. Edward has been doing this for years. We never learn his real name. However, despite his illness, he possesses the unique qualities of love and empathy. His love and compassion for mentally ill people like himself allowed him to help these people. He even healed Eliza of her fear of being touched. As a result, Edward is able to act like a sane and normal person. The audience won't think he's a madman. Edward has a very strong character. One of the messages of this movie is how great the power of love is. It can overcome even man's greatest suffering, the mad soul. Thank you for watching. Don't forget, like, comment, subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on the notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video.